right next to it.
Get everything going. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out to Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board of Directors meeting on June the 17th. Roll call, Michelle?
Director Bernstein?
Present.
Director Bloom?
Here.
Director Jones?
Here.
Director Crawley?
Present.
And Director Solano is absent.
Okay, can we stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, we have to report out some great news from our closed session that we approved the chief contract. And we will be talking about it at item number 9 in our agenda.
So it's not approved yet, but.
Not yet, right.
Considering it,
Reevaluated.
We will be evaluated at item number 9. Thank you. Michelle, we have any comments?
Have no public comments, although if you want to announce, if anybody has a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. Remember, we're back to Zoom public comments.
Right, is anybody on?
There's a couple people.
Oh, okay. Please.
And I don't see any raised hands, so
Okay, move on.
Thanks.
Thank you. No public comments. We'll move into item number 1, chief report. Chief?
Thank you, Director. Members of the board and folks that are here in the room and watching via Zoom, happy to share with you the fire chief's report for June. Just a quick update on facilities. Station 1, not much has changed in attachment A there. The remaining funding needed kind of fluctuates from month to month. Yeah, so CIP fund balance goes up and down. So there's not changed much. That's been changed. The only other change on there is the first bullet point under update, and then that the plans will be submitted after feedback to the City of Menlo Park Planning Department on May 15th. And we anticipate city completing the review by June. So that is it on the Station 1 update. Nothing on recruitments and promotions. Other items, community engagement unit. Here's what's been going on over in Heather and on the world class presentations. We had fire extinguisher training with the staff at Four Seasons. We trained 15 employees over there. Senior safety presentations at the East Palo Alto Senior Center and Serenity Senior Services in East Palo Alto, 30 participants in total. Red Cross Ready class for seniors living at Mid-Penn Housing in EPA, 15 attendees. Red Cross Ready class for Menlo Oaks Neighborhood Association with 15 people in attendance. Another Red Cross Ready class for Youth United for Community Action Group of 15 people. School groups, Station 6 presentation for 60 kids plus 5 chaperones. Station 6 tour with 36 folks attending. The Lontrose School Career Fair. The engine crew attended that. Kirkhouse Preschool presentation to 50 children there. And community events, we had the Station 6 Museum Open House. That happens, I think, on the whole. It's the last something of every month. 20 people attended that. An East Library summer kickoff event where we had an engine company go out and attend that at the library. And then an Encinal Spring family picnic. We had an engine crew attend that. Briefly on the fire response analysis report, we have corrected the challenge with the bar graph on page 10 of your packet or page 5 of the actual report. Last month, the numbers were way off where we had the unincorporated area was by half the cost. So that's been corrected. There was some kind of issue with the data. We still have outstanding a question mark on the 2024 unincorporated data because that doesn't make sense compared to prior years and current years. So we're going to fix that also. New development update, just kind of a conversation with the board as we are paying attention to the 80 Willow project. Just wanted to share with you some of the additional potential impacts that might happen in our area around here. 80 Willow is being contemplated with 665 dwelling units, 530,000 square feet of office and retail and hotel space. Also interesting that they're not as visible because I think they weren't done under the builder's remedy. But the SRI project has current plans for 646 units. SRI is going to continue occupying space there, and there'll be new office space there. And the USGS, we don't have really a clear idea of what the plans are, but a lot of housing also. So it's just one of those awareness things as we talk about the impacts that will have on our service, both in increased population and increased traffic. There's a lot of lower visibility projects that are out there that aren't as politically sensitive, but still will have some significant impacts to us. Just we'll keep you in the loop on what's going on, and we'll make sure we keep having input with the appropriate city councils and planning departments. We had, Director Solano and I had an ALS JPA board meeting on the 21st. I know there was a pre-conversation that Director Solano was involved in with Chair of the Board of Supervisors Canepa about dispatch services. I wasn't present for that, so we'll have to wait till next month to hear what the gist of the conversation was between them. They also passed the budget at meeting. I attended Redwood City's badge pinning. That was in May. Chief Carter was pinned with he's the new fire chief there, along with a number of members of the department. Also a South City badge pinning just a couple weeks ago. Public Safety Communications meeting. I, along with Chiefs DeLay from San Bruno and Sampson from South City, are on a County Fire Chiefs subcommittee where we meet monthly with Public Safety Communications and Natasha. So that will just be an ongoing thing. It's mostly just about relationships right now, and also just talking about our service needs, very separate from the conversations that we've been having over dispatch costs. So that's helpful for me to be on that subcommittee. Zoom with the fire chief. We had that just back on May 27th with really good participation from our department, lots of questions being asked. So that I'm continuing to do that in addition to the coffee with the fire chief. Last coffee with the fire chief we did over at the vehicle maintenance unit or shop. So we're not just doing it at fire stations, we're also doing it with some of our folks in administrative positions. Attended the retirees luncheon just a couple of Mondays ago. That's an ongoing thing. They're always interested in hearing what's going on in the fire district, so usually they're giving some kind of report. San Francisco Creek JPA meeting. Director Crawley, myself, and the JPA director, Margaret Bruce, met last week. We had a really interesting discussion. I don't want to steal all of Director Crawley's information, so I'm sure she'll report out during her liaison. San Mateo County Emergency Services Council. This is my first meeting I attended via Zoom just to kind of listen in. We don't have, the fire district interestingly doesn't have a role in the Emergency Services Council. It's only members are members from the cities in the county. So trying to just have some kind of fire service presence there. They certainly talk about things that are relevant to us. A lot of it centers around the county's DEM program. Which is DEM, that's like their OES, their Department of Emergency Management. They have general responsibilities for the alert and warning systems and county plans. It just feels like there's been an absence on the fire side there. So I started doing that, and my plan is to attend those either in person or via Zoom in the future. Ecumenical Hunger Program, we actually went with a number of our folks from admin yesterday and volunteered over there. Always nice connecting with our community. Yesterday we volunteered over in the warehouse side, folding and sorting clothes. Great. And I tell you, as quick as we could put stuff on the shelf, people were picking this stuff out of our hands. Really excited to just putting it on a hanger and someone would come up and ask if they could have it. So it's a neat program. Also, I intend on attending the Atherton Town Council meeting tomorrow night. Director Bloom will be there via Zoom. I'm gonna show up. It was on my calendar anyway, and it's kind of appropriate. They are having some challenges just with sustainability with the ADAP program, so I know they're gonna chat about that at the Town Council tomorrow. Outstanding staff reports, still internal controls, policy, electrification of fire service vehicles. Palo Alto Airport expansion was added, related to water rescue was added at the last meeting. So those are on my list of future agenda items and significant incidents. We just had a single structure fire on June 10th. Fire started in the garage on Azalea in East Palo Alto, and we can get please, fire chief report.
Thank you, Chief. Item number 2 is public hearing. And so,
May I ask you a question?
oh, sure, go ahead.
I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about the what do you call it, the response time thing.
Sure.
And just because I don't mean to be picky here, and there could be, you've already said that there's some problems with the data and so forth. But I don't know if the problem is with the data or with me, but if you look at page, yes, it's page 10 of the report, which is page 16, I think, of the packet. Okay.
Which graph number are you looking at?
Well, all three of those graphs, just because if you look at the top graph, graph 6. By the way, there is graph 6, it looks like one line of type for the heading of that dropped out. I'm just pointing out, if you look at the other ones.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
But what I wanted to ask about is the 90th percentile line for the top chart. It doesn't matter which one really, but this is where it seems to say it's 7 minutes and 18 seconds. However, the line runs below the 7-minute mark on the chart. Is that a data problem?
So what I'm looking at here on graph 6, and these lines are unfortunately very close in color. The LEMSA requirement is that the local EMS agency requirement is that we respond within 6 minutes and 59 seconds, 90% of the time. That's our benchmark or standard. And what we're seeing in this one in particular, I believe this is just, for 1 month. It is what we did, our 90th percentile was at 7 minutes and 18 seconds. So
But
we
you see
were,
how, yes, I would get that.
but I see what you're saying, at the 7, it doesn't
It's
show
below,
that.
it's below the 7-minute line.
I see what you're saying.
And
It's on the wrong side of that 7-minute line.
that's what I'm saying, and I
That's a
just
great
wondered if that's a data problem or something. It's not my understanding.
I
It's faulty.
don't know if they physically draw the line in there or not, but that might be an input problem.
The limit of the line is wrong too.
Well, the same thing
Oh,
that,
yes, they're
the
both.
same thing is
Yes,
true of the chart below that
Yeah,
as
Oh, I
well. And the chart on the right, same problem. I don't mean to, I don't,
No, I
I'm not trying to be picky you, but I'm just trying to make
I
sure.
appreciate that, because we will give them some feedback with the company that we're using.
Okay, and 7 minutes, it happens to be our target, so it's an important number.
I agree.
And then let me just ask a couple of other, not related to this, but a couple of other quick questions. When you say public service communications, and then you mentioned dispatch, do public service communications include dispatch? Is that part of that?
They call themselves Public Safety Communications, PSC.
PSC.
But is that from us to our own vehicles, or is that dispatch to us?
Oh, when I say, well, let me see if I can explain. When I say Public Safety Communications, it's the dispatchers over at the San Mateo County admin building in their dispatch center.
I see, okay,
And they do both fire and law over there, it depends on which side of the dispatch center you're on. And so that's receiving calls and then dispatching out either police and law enforcement units or fire and AMR units.
It's their department.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Sure.
That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So we'll move on to, item number 2, public hearing, which is, to discuss the, for the 25-26 budget, district budget and full-time equivalent staff level. This is a public hearing. Are there any someone in the public, want to say something, Michelle?
I'll just go ahead and ask if any member of the public has a public comment that's on Zoom, if you could please engage the raise hand feature. Seeing none,
Seeing none, then I'll call the public hearing closed. We need to take action on that. If I can get a motion from item number 3,
correct.
okay. So gonna get a motion from any board members to adopt the
I'll
resolution.
move that we adopt by resolution the district's fiscal year 2025 to 26 final budget and full-time equivalent FTE staffing level.
I'll second that.
Yes, we moved to second. Any call for questions? Chuck?
I do have a couple, but I don't have to go first here. I have, these are small questions, but I'd like to understand everything that's in here. On page. On page 29 of the budget, page 39 of the packet. And the section that I'm referring to is the workers' compensation section.
39 of the packet.
I was wondering, just because I don't know this, and I would be curious, are workers' compensation payments pensionable?
No. So just for clarification, page 39 of the packet
The claims.
is page 20 and 21 of the budget.
Okay.
So page 20 and 21.
Yeah, page 20 and
Page
21.
30 and-
Page 30.
Okay, so workers' compensation payments are not pensionable. Is that?
Pensionable meaning, if it's, actually included as, part of the first, salaries.
Yeah, the pension calculation.
If workers' comp, are you referring to the claims or 4850?
If somebody is collecting workers' comp because they're not working.
Oh, okay, so it's the 4850.
Yeah, so the 4850 is not taxable.
It's not.
But is it pensionable? Would it go to
Is it
our UAL
reportable
bottom
first?
line?
It's reportable to PERS, but I don't actually, now I'm confused, sorry. Kristen just wrote me, yeah, 4850 time, but payment is coming off, so yeah, 4850 time PERS is deducted. But any, taxes aren't taken out from the 4850,
So they pay into PERS and
They
we
pay
pay
in-
into PERS.
yeah.
They don't lose service
They
credit
don't
when
lose
they're
service credit
off.
because they're out for a
Yeah.
year.
I see. So that, they accrue more benefit for the
They-
future.
Yeah, they accrue years of service.
Okay, so it is pensionable, I think it's the right answer. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to have a complete picture of that. Contract negotiations. Then on page, just because I didn't know what this was, I should know. On page 56 of the budget, it's the FTE chart. What is the logistics specialist, or who is that? Where are they? That's the warehouse?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just wasn't aware of that title, so. And then. This may be minor, but I don't see the difference. I'm looking at page right now, page 17. It's 73, page 73 of the packet. And, page,
Talking about the fitness,
pardon me,
the fitness on 73.
yeah, fitness. And where's the other one I'm looking for? 64. 64. No, I got the pages wrong. There's another section called welfare, I think. Wellness, sorry. It seems to me that fitness and wellness are the same functions. And we don't have to redo the budget or anything, but I just think that those ought to be merged somehow, because we're dealing with the same things. Some of the wording was very similar, unless there's some major distinction that I'm missing.
The distinction with fitness, it's really the physical body, and wellness is the mental health and psyche. And I think so, we've been spending a lot of time and energy and money on firefighter behavioral health and wellness. And so we have it as a separate budget. The fitness is generally our fitness equipment that's in the fire stations, if we have any members of the fitness cadre doing training related to that, so. For us, they're distinct and separate.
I see, so wellness wouldn't include like a weight loss program or something like that.
Yeah. I don't, it doesn't currently, the way we have wellness, basically defined.
Okay, so wellness is mental and fitness is physical. Okay, well, it's not a big deal, I just was curious about it. But to me, the body is all one, but.
They are very close.
Okay, and then I think I had one other question.
Yeah, take your time,
Oh, I wanted to ask about,
page.
page 94 of the packet.
94.
Yes,
Water rescue.
the water rescue, thing. Roughly in the middle of the page, the last bullet under program objectives talks about swimming training for Menlo deckhands. What's a Menlo deckhand?
It is the rescuers on the airboat or the rigid hull.
Or the what?
Or the rigid hull boat that we have. So we have different levels of training for each position within the water rescue programs. And our deckhands are basically the members that staff the airboat and staff the rigid hull that aren't necessarily the pilot of the boat.
Are they a high level one or a lower level?
They're a lower level than the pilot.
I see.
It's kind of a marine thing. There's a captain of the boat, and then there's deckhands.
Okay.
And that's how just marine
This is
services
the
work
deckhand
in
of the
general.
boat.
And they
Folks
are
to drive
our
the thing.
firefighters. They're our firefighters.
Yeah,
They're
but
not
in this case, they're
investigators.
firefighters, it's just that there's one that pilots the boat and then there's deckhands that man the boat.
And then that next sentence says they supply rescue swimmers with wetsuits for non-contaminated water rescues. So the water has to be clean or they won't go in, is that the idea?
We have different types of PPE depending on the type of water that we're in. If we're in sewer contaminated water, like we were in Katrina, we have a different type of PPE that we would use if we just go out to the bay.
But when you went to Katrina, do you take both of those with you, just depending on what you need?
Take the good stuff, we go out because we know we're gonna be involved in a disaster area and more than likely the water is gonna be contaminated.
The good stuff meaning it's a higher level or more safe, okay. I'm sorry, I just wanted to know what we're paying for here. Those are all the questions that I had.
All right, so there's been a motion on the table, seconded, and call for the vote. Michelle?
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye.
Director Solano is absent. Director Jones?
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item, we got the consent calendar, item number 4 to 8. I can get a motion to approve the consent
moved.
calendar, or someone want to put something else.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Motion been made, and seconded,
I second it.
Gary seconded. Michelle, can we call for a vote?
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye.
Director Solano is absent. Director Jones?
Aye. Motion carries. We'll move now to our regular agenda item, which is to approve the Fifth Amendment of the employment agreement between Menlo Park Fire Protection District and Fire Chief Mark Lorenzen. Nicole? Yeah.
In recognition of the chief's performance over the past year and in accordance with the board's own evaluation process, board will now consider an amendment to approve a 3.5% increase to the chief's salary for a gross salary of $380,031, effective July 1st, 2025. In addition, an extension of the term of the employment agreement by 1 year, and the amendment will be publicly available.
Okay.
So, I'll move to
Can we
approve.
get a motion to?
Yeah, I'm moving to approve the Fifth Amendment of the employment agreement between the Menlo Park Fire Protection District and Fire Chief Mark Lorenzen.
The motion been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Gary. Call for question. Not, then Michelle, you to vote?
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye.
Director Solano is absent. Director Jones?
Aye. All carries. So we move on to item number 10, which is to adopt a resolution authorizing the fire chiefs to execute the First Amendment to agreement, blah, blah, blah. There's the numbers with the State of California Governor's Office of Emergency Services in the amount of $135,960 to support the training of California Swiftwater Flood Search and Rescue 3, CAFSS and R3.
I will take this. I've got Chief Wordinger forming up in the bullpen if we need him for any questions. This is really somewhat of a formality. In the past, we've had relationships with LOES in sponsoring or funding our Swiftwater rescue training. This year, they basically combined, I think, 2 contracts and it increased it over my authority. So in the past, it was in the $89,000 range. So with the increase, it now requires board authority to approve it in an amount of $135,960. This is a reimbursement. There's no cost to the district for this. This is just allows us to train and they reimburse us for the funding. That, I will open it to any questions, and I have Chief Wordinger here if you guys have any specific questions.
I would just comment that the finance committee did do this in committee as well.
I even had that note on there.
Set by here.
Sure.
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 questions, and I mean, in general, I support this, but I just want to make sure I understand again. Because we haven't looked at this before, it's kind of new to me. What is the relationship between Task Force 3 and Rescue 3? I mean, is it the same unit or?
The Chief Wordinger shared what the nuances are between.
So all of our special operations falls under elements of the NIMS, National Incident Management System, typing system. In California, they took the 8 California teams that represented the FEMA task force system, and they gave all 8 teams a Swiftwater rescue component, or a SFS and R component to those teams. And that's when the state started to support water rescue within the state of California. Since then, the task forces with the federal deployment went to Katrina. And after Hurricane Katrina, the federalized portion of Task Force 3 started doing water rescue as well. So there is an extreme amount of crossover between the members of Menlo Park Fire who are on the airboat, jet ski, water rescue internal Menlo Park team, and then the members who can deploy to on state deployments with the Cal OES deployment, and the members that can deploy with FEMA on federal deployment. That's, we have all the same players operating all the same items. But to get back to the question, yes, the Swift Water team from Cal OES has its roots in the FEMA California Task Force. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's the second question I had, because there's an issue that we have of a new boat and so forth. I looked through the contract and I didn't see it, but is there a requirement to have a certain level, a certain number of boats or a certain coverage of boats or something?
So we have 3 different caches of boats within our water rescue or special operations program. We have the boats that Menlo Park Fire purchases for elements that we would normally use on the bay, and that includes our airboats, our rigid hull, our jet skis, and we even have a Menlo Park Fire purchase IRB. The state of California and OES with the Swiftwater Floodwater Search and Rescue, they only operate inflatable rubber rafts. The elements inside the California Task Force 3 Water Rescue world, they operate under inflatable rubber rafts as well as John boats. And that's the reason why we have so many different assets on water rescue, is because whatever master we're serving at the time is going to want us to use their equipment. So the equipment that we have for Cal OES is actually provided to us by Cal OES. We don't actually purchase any of that equipment. The state gives us those assets.
What about the ones for Task Force 3?
The ones for Task Force 3, it's they give us money to buy those assets. They don't actually physically give us the boats. They give us the money and the specification.
And do we own those boats then?
The federal government has been promising to give us all that equipment for quite some time, but there's because it deals with federal funding, the attorneys have to all decide that is appropriate or not. And their goal is basically to through the grant process to back up a little bit. The federal government is very cumbersome to try to do an audit of all the monies and all the equipment that we have, and they would much rather just give those over to the fire district than have to worry about the auditing and the. My job would be a lot easier that record of that.
So you have to keep an inventory, basically.
We have to do an inventory. So every year we do an inventory for Menlo Park Fire. It used to be for anything over $5,000. I believe that number has been $10,000. And in the federal side, I have to do an inventory for everything under $5,000. And we have $7.2 million of equipment at the warehouse that
And yes, those assets aren't listed on our balance sheets as. Okay. And then there was one thing, I know it seemed to be crossed out, but then sometimes it was brought in. It seems like, particularly this training, that we offer the training, we're supposed to get reimbursed. But if some of the trainees don't finish the training, we don't get reimbursed, or I wasn't clear with all the crossouts, whether
So-
that's true or not.
in this agreement, in the original agreement that is amended, so the original agreement was only a 2-year agreement, but actually worked out to be 18 months. And in that agreement, those monies were only available for instructor costs and the feeding and housing of instructors and students. In this new agreement, what they've done is they've increased the ability for us to spend the money on different items. So now we can use those dollars for overtime and costs with overtime and backfill of the actual firefighters attending class. There was a significant breakthrough with the state of California, that the cost associated with our special operations is not just the cost of the class for the instructors, but the cost of getting our personnel to the actual class and the backfill of that. So that's why we were able, as the program managers within the system, to push the state to amend that contract to allow for such expenditures.
So let me make sure, I'm going back to the chief's statement that there's no fiscal impact, this doesn't cost us anything. Is it possible that we are providing more expenses to cover this than we are being reimbursed for?
So whether or not we're getting reimbursed from the state of California for the training we do at Salmon Falls, which is the majority of the funding that we've utilized to offset, or the majority of the funds being utilized to offset the district funds are the funds that we use at Salmon Falls, swiftwater rescue training. Whether you know it or not, the small current in the bay out here classifies as a swift water. And in order to, according to national standards, in order to train on that swift water, you have to train in an area with a certain level of speed water. We don't have that in our immediately available, so we take our team once a year to the American River. I believe this correctly. The American River, there's a Salmon Falls area, and we spend a week at Salmon Falls with instructors, and our employees cycle through those hours during the course of that week for a day to get their. We try to push it on a bi-annual basis, but we do it every year because we have so many people that we have to get certified through the NFPA process that's recommended through NIMS. And whether or not, the gist of it is whether or not we were going to be reimbursed by the state of California or not, because we have a water rescue program, we were going to be doing that training.
So the subtlety of it, if I can add to it, because we went through this in the finance committee as well. The subtlety of it is, we were going to spend this money to train our people to be able to do water rescue because of the currents in the bay. And it just happens that because the state has this program, they're subsidizing and essentially paying for our training. So we would have to do, if the state said we're not doing this, we would still have to train our people in swiftwater rescue.
And I'm not challenging that, I'm just curious, why would we have to do that? Just because it's good practices or
No,
that's?
because the standard for us to be able to do water rescue in the bay because of the currents is that our individual firefighters responding and doing that work have to be Swiftwater certified.
I see. And previous to this, were we not being reimbursed for that training?
Previous to this, the only reimbursement we would use, we would offset some of this training potentially with FEMA grant money, with the cooperative agreement. So the federal government, the state government, and the local government were all in some way trying to follow NIMS requirements, which points back to the NFPA. And there's different committees within all three of those entities, and they all interpret NIMS a little bit different, but they're all pointing to the same zone. So we can use Menlo water rescue funds, now state water rescue funds, and federal cooperative funds for water rescue to provide this training.
So this money now, this is a positive.
That's very much positive. We've been pushing the state to do this significantly, and next month we'll be coming to you with an even bigger number for something else.
Okay, and this is kind of a stupid question, but it just, does the water rescue ever go into San Francisco Creek?
We have responded internally to overflows of the creek prior to the improvements made under 101. Frequently, early on in my career, the creek would overflow and portions of East Palo Alto and Menlo Park would flood, and we would essentially be there. But I don't believe, and Chief Boyle, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there has been a flooding in our jurisdiction since they have addressed the concerns with the creek.
So we need, do we put boats into San Francisco Creek?
We have put boats on the streets of East Palo Alto. I think there's actually pictures of our IRBs floating down and running, or West Bay Shore? West Bay Shore,
But if you had a response in the creek, it would be an inflatable.
more than likely, correct?
I see. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know what, this really relates to our readiness and some of those things more than the actual money, but I wanted to understand. Okay, thank you. That's all I have to add.
Any more questions? I think there was a motion and a second.
There's no motion yet, but I'll make a motion
Yes, please.
to authorize the fire chief to execute the First Amendment to Agreement A 23-101-2703-A1 with the State of California and the Governor's Office of Emergency Services in the amount of $135,960 to support the training for California Swift Water Flood Search and Rescue 3.
Motion been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Gary, second. I call for the question. We're gonna have comments. Michelle, can you get a?
And before we take a vote, I'll just ask if there's any member of the public on
Yes.
Zoom who wishes to give public comment, please engage the raise hand feature now. Seeing none,
Seeing none.
we'll do a roll call. Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Crowe.
Aye.
Director Slaughter is absent, and Director Jones.
Aye. Motion's carried. We'll move on now to item number 11, adopt a resolution. Pardon?
I just said thanks.
Oh. Capital assets and surplus policy, I guess, Chief?
Started off by saying this has been reviewed by the finance committee and they thought it was an incredibly great policy, and then we turned over to Elaine to discuss what we are trying to accomplish.
So good evening again, everyone. So again, as the chief mentioned, this policy was deeply explained and discussed in the finance committee. So this policy overall, what we're trying to achieve here is we're trying to formalize and memorialize things that we have been doing. And things that we think we should be doing. So most of the items that you see here, or most of the policies and narratives that you see here are things that we have already been doing, but we added like a few things like here and there, like based on some updates with accounting standards and some updates with the thresholds and things like that. So the policy, which actually starts on page 406, I believe.
400 and what?
408, sorry, 408.
In the pack,
In the
page 1 of it's attachment A.
So page 408, so that's really just to start at the policy, but I would just like to give like an overview of what is in the policy in itself. So it really outlines the asset categories, the capitalization, guidelines and thresholds, the procedures for acquisition, tracking, depreciation and disposal. It also includes guidelines for surplus property, some budgetary controls, updates again on relevant accounting standards, and the process for regular policy review. So I won't go over like each of the section in detail, but I would like to point out a few things that I think it's worth emphasizing. So if you go on page 411, so that's actually page 3 of the attachment. So the 411 from the packet overall.
Page 4.
Yes, it's page 4, again, page 411. So the section 4, capitalization guidelines. So this, what it states is, we actually set, some threshold from what we would consider as the capital asset. So there's like 2 categories here. One is capital outlay. So capital outlay is just like individual purchases like assets with a unit cost of $10,000 or more. So the $10,000, the basis of that is, we actually have been using $5,000 for the past decades or so. So now due to, like the market conditions, and, what really is considered a capital asset, we actually upped it to $10,000, and this is actually consistent with the uniform guidance as well. So the uniform guidance is, the federal guidance for cost principles, administrative costs, and audit requirements for any grant. So we match it, with that for us to be consistent since, we are also handling like federal grants here, which is, the cooperative agreements. The second one is, the capital improvement projects. So for this one, we didn't really have, a threshold set in the past. So this, if it gets approved, what we're actually proposing is, to set a threshold of $50,000, for any capital improvement projects. So, the basis for that amount is, really, if we actually compare it, like, with different agencies, it really varies, in how they're actually, setting their threshold. It could be 5,000 to as high as actually $100,000. We actually choose 50,000 because, it's based on, the previous projects that, we have, our agency size, which is not too small, not too big, and, some industry standards. So we think, $50,000 is reasonable and would really add substantial, value or improvements for it to be capitalized. And then, again, just a few notes on that as well. Like, so any minor improvements now that's actually below, those thresholds, are not going to be considered capital assets. It's going to be under the operating expenses. And then any project, if the function or if, the intent, or if the output really is to just restore, the current like capital asset into its original condition, even if it's above the threshold, it's not going to be considered as capital asset, but it's just going to be considered as repairs or maintenance. And then another thing that I want to point out is on page 414. Page 414, actually, no, it starts on page 415, the first paragraph on page 415, and that's regarding the donation language, for surplus. So this is, we added this specific rule for, narrative. What it says is, the district or the fire chief has the discretion to actually donate a certain, asset to fire departments, or other like fire districts, municipalities within our jurisdiction. If we determine that it is for public interest and it would actually benefit the community in general, and if it's actually supporting emergency response like capabilities as well. So that's added. So we don't have to go through like other, or the chief has the discretion to actually not go through the first like three like options for surplus, but instead go directly with the donation if there is a need or if there is justification for that. Chief, I don't know if you wanna.
Sure, and I very much appreciate the rewriting of this. It's been a struggle for us to comply with the surplus policy and then make donations of some of our used vehicles like to the city of East Palo Alto. Because the order in which things went through in the surplus policy was it had to have no value in order for us to officially be able to surplus it. So this gives us a little bit more leeway, and it also will allow me with board approval specifically. Like if we have a vehicle that we would like to donate to the city, I'll still be coming back to the board asking for specific approval for that. So it will still give the board some oversight on those things. And again, just on small de minimis items, we can donate them if they have very little value to us and they were under the $10,000 threshold. We could donate them to another fire department or city, but in the case of some of our vehicles, I know that the city of East Palo Alto always have interest in. We might on occasion come to the board and ask for permission to send some of our surplus vehicles there.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Open up for questions?
I have some.
Yeah, cool, go for it.
I was curious, going back to the first page of the staff report. It talks about the discussion here of what this policy is supposed to do and so forth. Which is, I think all these are admirable things and should be done. I was curious, And then did we have to buy an asset module or something to handle this from an accounting standpoint?
Not currently, no, we don't.
Meaning we already had one, or meaning you're not gonna
Right
use
now,
one?
when it comes to the tracking of, the asset, the capital assets, we have certain like codes that we actually, allot like for purchase of capital assets. And, we segregate that using our current accounting system. So we're already tracking that like separately in our accounting system. But when it comes to, the actual, depreciation in the life and then the lapsing schedule, pretty much, your assets, your depreciation and your current market value, we actually just track that using Excel. Worksheet, so it's a combination of, accounting, our current accounting system when it comes to, monitoring and, budgetary controls. Plus, that Excel worksheet, for the depreciation and useful lives of the assets.
So if you do it in Excel, then you just make a journal entry for those things?
So it's not necessarily for the purchase of the capital assets, yes. For depreciation, it's a little different because, for governments, we have like two types of like, financial statements. One is, the modified accrual one, which, we actually don't, book it, the depreciation and the market value, but it rolls up to the overall, like, government-wide financial, statements, which is a different, accounting basis. But that one is actually done during the audit process, so we have like a reconciliation of how it's done and presented in financial statements.
Well, you're very brave to try to do it on your own, because I think it's difficult, but anyway, let me ask, some other, a couple of other questions. On page, on page, 411. I don't quarrel with any of the change, either the change or the establishment of the capitalization guidelines. But I wondered if you've given any thought, or there was any issue with how this might affect our insurance and so forth. If we don't book those things, does that affect our ability, if there were a fire or something, to get reimbursed for them?
No, it won't affect anything because this capitalization guideline really is just for, accounting. So it won't really have like, an effect, on insurance and such.
And then on page, the one thing I felt a little uncomfortable about, on page 414. It doesn't, there's something covered on page 415, but it doesn't mention anything about a sale to a related party. And I think we should address that. In other words, because there are people there who know the value of various things, I think it would be either we need a procedure for a sale to a related party, or we need to exclude a sale to a related party. I know this came up once, again, there was nothing messy about it, but the chief, Chief Schopenhauer, when he wanted to perhaps purchase the van that he had from the district. And the question was, what was the fair market value of the van and so forth? Where in this case, the chief had a conflict of interest. It never got pushed to a problem. I'm just saying it bordered on a potential problem.
We actually do have some sort of a language actually pretty similar to, what you were asking about, Director Bernstein. So on page 415.
But this doesn't address it. That's what I was saying.
Page 415.
Oh, really? 415, which is the item that's in bold.
Yeah, it just says they're prohibited from retaining.
415.
Yeah, page 415, the bold part, right?
Retaining
Yeah.
something in the software for sale, donation, or approval, so they can't buy it either.
Well, is that what retaining means, is not buy it? I thought
Yeah.
retaining means keep it where nobody knows about it or something.
Yes, no, Director Bloom is actually correct. Though the intent of this is retaining surplus property offered for sale, donation, and or disposal by the district. Because we do surplus in 3 different ways. Right now, like the sale, donation, disposal, or trade-in. Trade-in is not applicable because it's in the manufacturer. So really the intent is, no one can actually like keep, the surplus, from those like really methods. If you're, a related party, which is employee, directors or, officers of the district.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. Is retaining?
That's our intent, even if I understand how it might not be worded that way, but that is our intent, is that any of those freeways, in the case you were talking about with Chief Chapelhoman, he would have been prohibited from purchasing a district-owned vehicle.
Well, the only way they could retain it is, the only way it'd be part of the surplus policy if it's for sale, donation, or disposal. And then they're not allowed to retain it, so they can't participate in that process.
And we've had challenges in the past where we have disposed of stuff in the dumpster and people have gone and fished it out and taken it home. And so you'll notice it's in bold. It is really clear, we don't want any,
Employees.
anything that is, that smells of any kind of anything. So that's, yes.
So let me be sure.
So,
If somebody, if we turn this over to an auction house or something, and they auctioned it off, an employee couldn't buy it in an auction, is that correct?
Correct.
And can I just ask our counsel, is the word retain includes purchasing?
I think, we could certainly clarify it with purchase or retain if the board wanted to, but it sounds like the intent here is to interpret this very broadly to include purchasing or, as the chief mentioned.
Okay, well,
So-
if that's how it will be interpreted, then I have no issue with it, but that's not my notion of what retain means.
The only way they could retain it is to buy it from the sale, and that's prohibited.
so can I ask just a harebrained question? In the case, and I'm referring back to Chief Harold, that vehicle was a specific use for a specific person. So even if it goes out in the open marketplace, there's only limited individuals who would actually be able to drive it because it was custom fit. So that still falls into the prohibitedness of it.
It would, the way this is written. Yeah, that said, if the board wanted to override the policy, we can certainly come with board action and do that, just like we did with the donation of the engine to Maui, right? It was not in alignment with our surplus policy. We asked the board for an exemption from the surplus policy of that. So it could be possible, but again, it would be very public and the board would approve, and that's the way we approach it, something similar.
I think this is the right way to do it, which is, it's just a blanket prohibition against it. And then if there is something that the team wants to do differently, they have to bring it to the board to get the exemption, because it's a board approved policy.
I agree with that. I agree with that. However, I think that if it's not anywhere stated in the policy that option.
Right.
That option exists on all policies.
So if I could
I'm
just
not sure.
clarify.
To be more blatant.
I'm not sure.
If I could clarify one issue on this point, there's state law that is going to supersede what the board can do with regard to conflicts of interest on disposal of surplus property. This is more than what state law requires, it's a blanket prohibition, as
Right.
the board has mentioned in an effort, I think, to probably be extra clear and to not get into some of the weeds, because that gray area is where we sometimes run into trouble. So while the board may be able to waive this provision in some cases, it would be an analysis to determine whether or not that presents a conflict of interest in the law. Or if it would be permissible.
But that would be part of the board process to
Absolutely.
consider
Right, but-
the waiver of the policy.
And you're right, it applies in any policy that the board can
Right. But,
waive the requirement.
and I think I know what you're saying, Robert, if I may.
Sure.
So if someone were to say, like, oh, we wanna donate something to the East Palawancha or whatever, right? I'm just, because
Just
that's
find
something-
another city.
Well, no, I mean,
It
because
is.
Mark brought it up, or Menlo Park, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Someone on the board say, well, we can't, it's based on our board policy, so it's not explicit, and maybe it doesn't have to be, but I don't know, I mean, in some ways, it's almost like if it's not in there stated explicitly that the board can vote on this to accept, to have an exception for some of like individual items or whatever.
I'm confused by what you just said, because a donation to the city of Menlo Park would not be prohibited by this policy.
Well, I'm, or
Doesn't matter who proposes it.
It's the
Yeah, okay, so
person
what
that's
I'm-
working here.
The
in
board
this-
Yeah,
member is
okay.
not the beneficiary.
Sorry,
Menlo-
sorry,
Menlo
sorry,
Park is
yes,
the
yeah.
beneficiary.
But I'm just, okay, I'm just saying in general though, it's like, if we say, and I get it, Gary, so I guess, and maybe I'm just splitting hairs here, but if we don't say that the board can do this, then it's an automatic presumption, it seems like, that from my experience being on board, that the policy says no, so we can't,
Yeah,
right?
that's, as
Is
it's
that-
written, as it's written.
That's the idea of, in my view,
That's
that's the
where it's
idea of the
written.
policy is you're stating what staff and management are allowed to do and
I
not
know,
allowed
I
to
know,
do
I know.
with
I know.
clarity. And
I'm
then
actually in support of.
Yeah, and
this.
then if there's something that you wanna do outside of that policy, it's forced to come back to the board. for
Right, but
consideration.
we've been in a situation before where it's like, well, we can't because the board policies say that we can't. And so it's not even gonna be looked at.
Not even considered. And I'm
Right.
just saying, is there a sliver of hope that if it comes back to the board, I mean, not even if it come back to the board, but if someone looks at the policy and it's pretty clear, you can't do it, but yet still and going back to Chief Harold, it's a one-off kind of a situation where it was customized for his particular need. Who else in this universe, there may be other folks that might can use it, but probably not, just because it's custom fit. This policy will override it, overrule that, you can't at all, no matter, under any circumstances.
But that's, I don't know how it worked at that time. If this policy was in place at that time and board members or the chief or staff thought, well, we should allow it because of the unique circumstances you
I'm
just
saying that
said,
it would not
they
have
would,
been,
they would bring it back to the full board for consideration.
maybe,
But I
maybe
think that-
not. That's,
See, the thing is, once it's in writing,
Yeah.
this is the gospel. Now, if you read it and it says what it says, and you want to be obedient to the bylaws that's written between these pages, then you just drop it at that point.
and
You
I
don't
didn't even
go
think of it
forward.
until you brought it up just now. Cause I think
So-
the policy's good, it's just,
Yeah, I'm okay either way. I don't want to split hairs anymore tonight on it, but
Well, my only point on it is that any policy we have, there's always going, the potential of a circumstance of something that doesn't fit the policy or is
Right.
outside the scope of the policy.
right,
That applies to 100% of our policies.
Yes.
And then it's incumbent upon the chief and staff to ask the board for an exception, which then introduces the full public process of considering an exception to a standing policy, which is, I think, exactly how you want things to work.
yes.
I agree with you that it would discourage some
I think
things,
it's- I think
but you
it-
want it to discourage things so that only true exceptions emerge and come back to the board.
and
You don't
on-
want 100 items coming back to the board. If you want people to believe this is the policy, and in a very unique situation of an exception, that would come back to the board.
And I don't know what word they come up with, they kind of split those hairs, but, either way, I think it's a good policy, and and 9 times out of 10, you have people that take advantage of, if it's written in there. So in this case, it's a blanket, don't even think about it, just go home, figure out another way to finance this thing for yourself and move on. Because it can be the reverse order thing. You can have very liberal policy and the board say, hey, it's too liberal. Let's clamp this thing down and not approve it. So I don't,
On that note, I would actually
Make a
comment that
motion?
the finance committee in a couple situations wanted to give more leeway to staff. And the response from staff and the chief was, well, we'll consider those kind of modifications a year from now. Let's have a restrictive policy now. We can modify it here.
so is there any other comments regarding this particular policy? If not, then I'll call for a motion.
So I move that we approve the district's capital asset surplus policy.
I'll-
As presented.
I'll second that.
Motion been made, seconded. Any comments, Michelle, from the public?
If there's any member of the public on Zoom that would like to give a public comment, please engage the raise hand feature now.
Seeing no raised hands.
Seeing none.
Call for a vote.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Raleigh.
Aye.
Director Solomon is absent, Director Jones.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move on to item number 12, which is to discuss and approve the policy statement section of the emergency preparedness policy. Chief?
This one should be easier than the last one.
I don't know, I have.
I don't know. I haven't-
I have some issues with.
I think you're speaking too soon, Chief.
You just jinxed it.
Okay, well, happy to make changes. This one is easier to come back. So, well, in the past, we've already had the board approve the purpose statement. We've had a draft policy statement in our draft policy, and so the two paragraphs that you can see below the return draft policy statement are the proposed words that we would like the board to consider for approval or modification.
Well, it's basically the
Go ahead
one,
and finish,
right,
then.
it's the one statement.
It's
One
the two
statement.
paragraphs.
Yes.
Two
right?
paragraphs.
Okay.
So with that, happy to have comments and also make changes. And the plan is, we're just kind of trying to piece through this and take it one bite at a time. We can, based on board feedback, go back and make some modifications like we did with I think we did with the purpose statement last time also. So looking forward to that feedback. And then hopefully in a very near future meeting, we'll be coming back with a whole policy for the board.
So I have
Fire away.
Fire away.
Yeah, so I just have one kind of real small comment, because I generally think the policy statement covers it. I would recommend you delete the comment that says with the recent staffing conditions in the risk reduction unit. Delete that part of the sentence,
Which one
because
is it?
that is not a policy statement. That's kind of a staffing operational statement. It should have, the staffing should have nothing to do with the policy.
Are you in the first paragraph
No,
or?
the second
second
paragraph,
one?
The
the
second
second
paragraph
sentence.
where it says with the recent staffing additions.
Yeah.
Right,
Delete
Yeah.
and just say that
Staff,
staff will
no.
develop a more specific strategy and make recommendations.
That makes.
yeah, that makes sense.
It just doesn't have, the staffing has nothing to do with the policy.
Right.
Right,
That's my only nit.
okay, I
got that?
have, mine's not so easy, Gary.
Did you get that?
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Consider it
you
done.
finished?
I'm done.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
Virginia?
Yeah, so, I have the original one on that kind of the prep committee wrote before. And it's very similar to, especially the second paragraph. The first paragraph has been modified with, in the very last clause, it says their primary focus on vulnerable populations and saving lives through community readiness and self-sufficiency. What is, that was not in the original one that I wrote, because I was looking at the fire district as a whole. So, what do y'all consider a vulnerable population? Is it socioeconomic, or is it like if you're a senior, is that a vulnerable population? Or if you live in, along the San Francisco Creek and you don't have fortification, for example, is that a vulnerable population? I mean, what is a vulnerable population? Because I think that we need to be looking at this in a much bigger picture way, where every resident in the district would need this kind of help. And not, I don't know what vulnerable populations mean.
Chief, are you?
I will say, I'm just looking, I don't know when the wording changed.
Well, I'm looking at an email that was from you and Jill, this was a draft one that I did back in July, I think when Gary and I think Gary, you and I were on the e-prep. In July, and so the second paragraph is very similar with maybe one little minor tweak, but the actual wording from the July 2024 draft says, and again, this is about a year ago, and some of the things have changed, but it says to ensure that the entire community served by the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Fire District is prepared for emergencies within 3 years, the primary focus on community readiness and self-sufficiency. So, I mean, I don't mind taking out the 3 years, which it looks like that was done here, but I don't know what vulnerable populations mean.
I don't,
here.
yeah, the language that is in here was not introduced by any current members of the E-Prep committee or
Well, it wasn't,
myself, and
okay.
so I don't, I guess what I'm saying, there's no ownership on those words, and your wording that you previously had in there sounds appropriate.
well, I mean,
You
it-
could
I
also
could-
just, Virginia, as a suggestion, you could delete vulnerable
well, so
populations. and-
that's what I had,
And just
so.
have primary
With a
focus on
primary
saving
focus
lives.
on saving lives through community readiness and self-sufficiency, which is closer to this other original one, but I'm not blaming anyone, I just
Okay.
wanna understand what vulnerable populations means, because that can mean so many different things to so many different people, and it doesn't matter where you live.
I think, I mean, let me just, if Chief, and, I have a particular pet peeve myself personally. Because you know, and it comes from understanding, because I've been in more communities besides Eastville also. And oftentimes what happens, when there's emergency, just like when we have our drills here within the district, who are the individuals that are least likely to escape at any given time during any different disaster? And those are typically the vulnerable individuals, the seniors who are handicapped, in wheelchairs, those that are disabled, those are, and I think what this particular clause is just adding a little bit more emphasis on, you know, a segment of our community that is less likely to be able to escape a house if there's disaster there. So that, to me, in terms of emphasizing that vulnerable, is just giving a little bit more emphasis on the readiness part. Because the readiness, I think, needs to be there for everyone. But then there are those individuals who are least likely to be, if they are bound by a wheelchair and there's a disaster to take place, you know, who's gonna be, you know, I think understanding those individuals in the community is gonna be very important. You know, just so that if you do your windshield assessment in your neighborhood, and if you know that particular house over there have that individual who is maybe wheelchair bound or has oxygen tank, then I think you probably, as a person to go out and rescue folks, you're gonna be particularly concerned about, you know, making sure that there is nothing, you know, that person is okay, because they may be alone. There may be a senior that has Alzheimer's or something. I'm just saying,
Someone who lives alone.
someone who lives alone, a senior that lives alone and is housebound. I mean, those are the individuals, I think, to me, and this is a personal thing. I mean, what the policy that the board come up with is a whole different thing. But in I don't know if it's defense of the word using, you know, in the vulnerable population, I think somewhere along the line needs to be high up on our list. And I don't know how to do it. And I know that, you know, yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that.
So
that's okay.
Robert, I would probably have violent agreement with what you just said.
Mhm.
But what it suggests is that we should define vulnerable.
Right,
Is all.
that's why I
And-
said,
and
what is
if the
considered that?
anticipation is that vulnerable is gonna get defined in the deeper part of the policy, and that's a placeholder to put in the work you know, the wording and the kind of characteristics you just said, I
Such
have no
as?
problem with it at all.
Yeah.
Cause I think you're defining vulnerable the right way, and
I
we know,
agree.
and we know that from the Southern California fires,
Right.
there were people that perished in the fires because they were in wheelchairs and could not get out.
You
The
know,
one lady couldn't get her son out, she was
Right.
physically unable to get her son out.
and that's one of the things we talked about at the E-Prep committee. We kind of looked at the Southern California fire
Yeah.
and also, you know, even other places around the country. So I think you're right, and maybe the vulnerable need to be defined or
That's not-
what that
yeah.
is up front.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I don't know that it has to be, I mean, to be clear, I don't know that it has to be defined here. As long as that's the intent of when you go to do the formal policy and do the next set of revisions, which is what this is, this is not a policy, this is a process to get to the policy,
Right.
really.
Right.
And if your plan is to define it according to those characteristics, I have no problem leaving it at all. just knowing
That's
that this
why I
is
wanted
part of
to
the
ask the
process.
question, like,
Yeah.
how are y'all defining that?
Because that to me is the right definition of it.
Right,
It's the part of the population that cannot self-evacuate very
Right.
effectively.
or maybe in in an area that, would be more vulnerable to, like flooding, for example. I'm just thinking of the creek, and it's just,
No, but we had this up at the campfires though,
Yeah,
too, because
yeah.
we had the vulnerable populations and then we had the nursing homes
yeah,
that were, incredible challenge to evacuate
yeah,
a few
and I
hundred
think those are
person.
vulnerable populations.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I think it's just a matter of defining it, and I think that definition can come as part of the policy work I think it's fine in a draft policy statement.
So when
Yeah.
is the rest of the policy gonna come back to the board?
Next week.
Next week or next? Well, I mean, we have something, so we have something in place, so what is, I mean, not that it's being, I mean, it's out there as a draft, so, I mean, when is the rest of that?
August or
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think the next part of it, Chief, if my recollection is that getting the board to kind of at least, work through the purpose, work through the statement, so that, because all the workflow is then gonna be with all the other things
Right, that's already out.
that's being formulated or already been created through the strategic plan. And we just have to prioritize that, or Chief is gonna have to prioritize it, because there's a lot there. Chuck?
I wanted to address something I see as a problem also in that same paragraph, just before part that Virginia pointed out, and that's the word resiliency. I think resiliency is what we're aiming for in the end, but resiliency is what occurs after the disaster. In other words, if we're prepared, we can be resilient, but having an elevated level of disaster resiliency really seems like it's after the fact. What we want is an elevated level of disaster preparedness or readiness, which is the front end of the whole thing. So I just don't think resiliency is the right word there.
Chief, isn't that just aligning to the new national nomenclature that's been
Resiliency.
established?
It's right
So,
I don't know for sure if that is or isn't in that.
Because
context.
that's how Chief Johnson had addressed that
Okay.
kind of comment previously, is that the national standards are evolving around the term community resiliency.
But again, that's measured after the
well,
disaster.
That's your definition of resiliency, but what he was referring to, I'm not the expert on it, but what he was referring to is this whole readiness process is creating communities that are resilient to disasters, meaning they can avoid disasters
Right.
and they can respond accordingly. So it's just a terminology, a nomenclature thing that was being established at a national level.
Well, yeah, but I think resilient means the ability to bounce back. Anyway, yeah, I don't think it relates to being ready. Anyway. But it's not a big deal.
Well, I mean, you can make it readiness would not change the direction of what you're going to do if you want to say a level of disaster readiness.
So Chuck, if I understand you correctly, you said the question, the statement said, and having an elevated level of disaster resiliency.
Yeah, he's
I
having,
think that's not correct.
yeah, with the word resiliency.
Yeah, resilient is the ability to bounce back.
Yeah.
And that's what you do after the disaster occurs. And what we're trying to do is get people prepared for the disaster before it occurs.
So you're thinking maybe readiness?
Readiness or preparedness or those
That's
kinds
what
of things.
the first part of the sentence
But
says.
yeah, and the last sentence says that too, the last clause.
I agree, that's what we're going, I just think resiliency is in the wrong place there, it doesn't. I mean, what we want is for them to be resilient once the disaster occurs. But not,
Well, isn't resilient, there's a preparation to get to that point? I mean, if you don't, to be resilient, somehow there has to be some level of education about what you need to be resilient against or for.
but first you have to have a disaster.
Absolutely, and first you gotta get prepared for that particular disaster, because we never know, if something happened here, we may have, you know, the earth may start shaking, that may be one thing, it may be raining and flooding at the same time, so there's a combination of things, I mean, we have to get prepared for. And I think the resiliency coming in, like you say, afterwards, what kind of training have you done beforehand to be resilient to the disaster, from my perspective, but maybe
If
that's.
somebody finished the training, we wouldn't give them a resiliency certificate because they were ready for it. I think that would be a misuse of the word. We would give them a readiness certificate.
I have no, and then once the disaster happened, then we can give them another one saying, okay,
You were resilient.
you're a resilient kind of person, but yeah.
So anyway, it's just words.
So is there
Or
any?
you could change to preparedness, because that's not already at the bottom like readiness is.
The preparedness is in the first part of the sentence. You say we are
Prepared
prepared to be
for
prepared.
emergency.
Prepared to serve for emergencies and have an elevated level of disaster resilience. It's
Yes,
both,
it's written.
yeah, it's both, I think it's both, because you, before and after, you gotta get prepared before and afterwards. We get prepared beforehand all the time, and you know, what happens? You know, are you ready to, you have shelters for people once they, you know, an earthquake happen? Are we prepared to have water for folks? Do we have the level of communication for folks after? So that's being prepared, getting ready for the resiliency part. Well, I guess we have to get some more work on that, don't you?
I got notes,
Well,
we'll take it
I
back to
have-
the committee for some better words.
Can I have
Sure,
one
please do,
more comment.
yeah.
I have one more comment. I don't know if Chuck's done.
I'm done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Mark, the first paragraph, I'm going back on the primary focus on vulnerable populations, I'm okay now understanding.
If we define it.
Yeah, but I'm not, maybe the heartache is really the word primary. Maybe, I mean, would they focus on, because we're focusing on a lot of, well, I don't know, maybe, I mean, we're supposed to be doing this, and yeah, we have a focus on the vulnerable populations as broadly defined, vulnerable populations. I mean, for sure that, we should, you know, look and see how we can get like their organizations prepared, like for the Peninsula Volunteers, for example, right? I mean, I know they probably, well, I'm pretty sure they have a plan, but I mean, just making sure that, you know, that, their plan jives with what we need and, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't know if it should be like the primary
I think it
population.
would be fun, and we're coming out vulnerable populations, I think it's fine to say with a focus on
Yeah,
vulnerable
I
population.
would feel better about
And
that.
saving lives through community, it includes everything. but
Yeah.
it just
I just,
calls out our most,
right,
the
but I
biggest
just,
challenge that we have in
right.
disaster. Yeah.
So, but
I think the
I.
biggest challenge we have is trying to summarize what we're doing, what we'll actually be telling is what the policy actually says.
I
we're going
know,
to
I
do.
know.
So this is a step to get to that part of the process where they're gonna work on what we're doing. I generally think the board should probably move on and, you know, save its energy for when he comes back with all the proposals of what they wanna do.
Right, so I'm giving him my thoughts on the word
Well,
primary,
just
so,
to
so
kind of.
think about that.
Kind of add a little bit to that, Gary, unless we can get this straight, what the chief, because the work plan is in all this other stuff that he's gonna bring back, so we don't have a clear direction,
Yeah, but
some direction.
I think we're debating nuances of wording versus the concept of what the chiefs could go work on.
Yeah, but I think
I-
we're giving him feedback,
We
but
we are digging up a hole here. All right,
I'm done.
anybody else? Everybody on word themselves
That was
out?
it, Director, Raleigh?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
I've got some notes, and some homework.
Okay,
Thanks for the robust conversation.
thanks for
Moving
your
on.
patience.
Item number 3, new proposed agenda idea. I think Chuck, you said you had something. that
I
you
have
wanted
one
to-
too.
Virginia, Gary, yeah,
I have done.
okay. New proposed idea,
Chuck?
We're on proposed agenda item.
Yeah.
number 13.
Okay. Yes, I would like to have a budget, agenda item relating to our response times and possible possible strategies for addressing some of those things. Specifically, I'd like to, among those, I'd like to look at having some sort of rapid response medical force that was that dealt with EMS calls and not fire. I'm not against fires, but a rapid response medical group that can respond without necessarily having to have the great big pool platform that an engine or truck is.
Would you be consider, cause that's a good, I like that, and I've heard it somewhere before. But, would you think that rather than spending board time, chief time, doing the level of research, but getting into more of a conversation in a study session, and then understanding it a little bit more, by having the chief to kind of bring himself and other experts to study session time, so we can really delve into the subject matter, and then from that, hopefully we formulate some policy and direction. Would that, would you be amenable to that? Because I think she's got a lot of hands-on time, and I'm saying the retreat that study session that we're planning is I think a good place to have quality time to really get into all the questions you brought up earlier.
I don't care about the format. The fact is, a study session is gonna be exactly the same as a board meeting. We have to notice it
Sure.
and comply with all the rules and everything.
Absolutely.
So I don't care if it's on a weekend, at night, during the day, on a weekend, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I'm like you, I just want to deal with the issue.
Yeah, studies, we're obviously not gonna vote on anything, whatever, it would be a discussion.
Well, just getting the concerns and real concerns, and having the chief the opportunity to do some research on the issues, and really bringing back the quality information that we may need.
Well, the chief has some experience having done this himself. And can talk about how he did that down south.
There may be some other areas or issues around
If I might,
that whole.
I think we should probably hold the discussion of the actual topic for when it comes back. I think Michelle probably has the
Just
understanding of what, and then I think this discussion is probably more appropriate when it's brought back to the board.
carry the edge.
Now, I'll just take it closely, we can talk about it next meeting, this is, per our process, is just putting it on the list to be discussed
Yeah.
next time. So we should discuss the format of it next time.
Okay, I have,
You got that, Michelle? I'll
This is just proposed agenda items.
Proposed
Just need an
agenda.
agenda
Yes.
item title.
The title.
okay, I have one, two. let's
Check for a title on that would be improving EMS services.
But
Be that a good title?
rapid EMS service,
You said you had two?
no, just
Oh.
one.
Okay, so, as the chief said, he and I met with the head of the San Francisco Creek JPA, Margaret Bruce, and I thought it was, her presentation in the meeting were so great that I think that the board should look at a presentation that she might have, just to get us up to speed on the creek issues and what the Creek JPA does. So I'd like to, at some point, put on a future agenda to invite Margaret Bruce to come and do a presentation about the San Francisco Creek JPA and the creek itself. And that could be, for the study session too, but in case that, this is an item that we can do or deal with or talk about later on, at some point, if it's not on the study session agenda, I'd want it on a future agenda for the board.
Well, right now, we are putting things on for
Right.
future agenda items, so the study of some presentation
study,
on the presentation or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
on JPA Creek service, so you got that, Michelle?
yeah,
Okay.
just inviting Margaret Bruce to come and do a presentation to the board on the San Francisco Creek JPA and
We're
the
gonna-
issues that she's
we're gonna
Would it be on the
talk about it first.
plans that they have? Is that what you mean?
No,
We're
I
not-
mean, just,
We're not here to
yeah,
discuss.
yeah.
No, but
We're
I'm
just
trying to
putting-
understand.
we're just putting it on the agenda.
just a
We just
presentation.
put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
We're not voting, we're not commenting. Am I correct
Yeah,
on this?
So
Okay.
it's just,
And when we put on the agenda, then there'll be a lot of questions
On
about,
the list, we can discuss it.
we
next
can
week,
discuss it at the
what the
next meeting.
content of it would be and vote on whether we're added to the agenda at the next.
Right, because right now we're just getting
I
ideas
just
on
wanna
the
get it
table.
on the,
Okay.
on the future agenda possibly.
It's on the, we got it on the
Thank
future tonight. Now, when it come up is another.
Right,
We love to
but I
see.
wanted to put it out.
Sure. Anything else?
Nope, not from me, thank you.
Okay. Gary? No, Chuck? Okay, moving on to item number 14,
Yes.
which is committee reports, emergency preparedness. I think, what the chief brought up regarding the policy is what we kind of spent some time on, and I don't have anything else to add on that. But stay tuned for the next, edition of the policy statement. And so, facility. That's,
So facilities did meet, the only thing we discussed was the kitchen remodel, there was a single agenda item. And the board, in the consent calendar approved the contract for that work. So that was, the work of the committee has already been voted on and accepted by the full board. Nothing else to report.
all right, thank you, Gary. Human resource.
Yeah, same thing with the chief's evaluation, so I just want to thank the board and to Steve Miller and Hanson and Bridget for their participation in helping us get this done.
But you didn't have a meeting, right?
But no, we did
Okay.
not, sorry.
All right, no worries, that's what we're here to find out. Finance,
Don't really have anything to report, I just recognize Elaine's work, I know he's left already to get the budget through. This was, I believe, in my tenure, the smoothest budget process we've had.
yeah,
And we voted.
It came in early, there were multiple discussions of it, it was never rushed. So that was primary work of the finance committee for the last 2 or 3 meetings was the budget. And that is now concluded, I have nothing else to report.
And on time.
You know,
well, I can say that, I mean, I was happy with Peacock, the way it was laid out. You know, and it took it section by section, I think that was,
yeah, so my only comment is through staff to pass along the appreciation to Elaine for his hard work on that.
okay, item number 15, liaison report, Town of Atherton.
So I didn't actually attend the last meeting, that there's been kind of an ongoing theme from the town of Atherton in community communications of late. One continuing to center around the fatal bicycle accident on Millfield Road. So they're continuing to put out bicycle safety bulletins and notices from the chief of police. And then he also recently put out another one, well, he actually put out one about bicycle safety. There was a second one that talked about everybody cooperating with each other on the road to further bicycle safety. And then the third one was regarding pedestrian traffic, kind of a reminder to the community as to what side of the road you're supposed to walk on.
Yeah,
Which in the town of Atherton is actually important.
Very.
Most of it doesn't have sidewalks.
Right.
There's a lot of blind curbs and you do get surprised on occasion. So there's been a tremendous safety focus coming out of since that accident. I think it's valuable public communication. And then, as the chief mentioned at their meeting tomorrow night, they'll be talking about ADAPT and it's my understanding to have discussion at the meeting about kind of a liaison type approach from the town council for ADAPT. And they're also going to have a discussion about whether Atherton should pursue a full-time employee similar to the way Menlo Park did, focusing on it.
On emergency preparedness.
Not community preparedness. So those are topics. Chief will be there in person. I'll be by Zoom for the town council tomorrow. And Chief, I will let them know. I mean, I haven't done that yet, but that will happen sometime tonight. That's all I have to report on Atherton.
Okay, City of East Palo Alto. Well, the city has approved their strategic plan for the next 4 years, 5 years. Now they gotta scramble to try to figure out how they're gonna pay for it. But it's, that's how things work. But I think they have had robust conversations about that as well as disaster preparedness. So, I mean, everything seems to be looking up in terms of at least having a solid plan for the next 5 years. So, City of Menlo Park.
Yes, so again, a pretty busy month. Couple of meetings to note. I attended the Menlo Park City Council meeting, which is basically a study session on the RFQ process for the Oak Grove parking lots. And they did vote to move forward with an RFP process. And they were just putting together the provisions they wanted in the RFP. And there were 4. I can't even remember all of them, but it dealt with, you know, who the vendors were and could they have subcontractors and all of that. So I think that's been finally decided. And then I watched the Menlo Park Council meeting when they decided to keep this east side of Santa Cruz Avenue close to Left Bank.
Say it again.
The east side of Santa Cruz Avenue close to Left Bank and Bistro Vita closed and keep it the same. I did talk to the mayor of Menlo Park because when he and the city manager and the chief and I met them, maybe 2 months ago or so, we expressed concern that in light of the potential development that's gonna happen on the Oak Grove parking lots, the Station 6 could be impacted and, maybe other stations, maybe even one if it came in. I mean, anyway, the accessibility in that area and the narrowness of that street could be a problem. And so the mayor told me that there may be one more chance where we might want to go to this meeting on July 8th to express our concern, because I think the mayor forgot to mention that. But I'm gonna try to get like the final, because they may moving forward with that, with the current vote, but I think according to the mayor, it's possible that there could be one more time where people can give feedback, and that I think is the July 8th meeting. So that's, I think we need to keep an eye on that. Because there was a time when that section, there was a proposal to open part of that closer to the restaurants, Bistro Vita and Left Bank. And so, and while keeping this other outdoor seating area closed. So anyway, I don't know if it's the final yet, but we just need to be aware of that moving forward. That's kind of in the development portion of your report too, kind of tag onto that. But that's all I have. But I just want us to be very mindful of the fact that, you know, the fire district hasn't really been proactive yet. I mean, we're just keeping an eye on all of these development proposals, but I think that we need to be mindful of the fact that these proposals for development, whether it's SRI, USGS, or 80 Willow Road, which is the Builder's Remedy project, will impact the district and in downtown too.
County District 3. I think that's Rob.
That's me.
No, it's-
Oh, that's you?
Nothing to
Okay. District 4, I don't have anything to report either. Cemetery County Hospital, Pre-Hospital Emergency Medical Joint Powers Authority. That's Rob, right?
Yes.
And he's not here, so we'll move on. San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority.
Yeah, I mean, I've already talked about it, that
Okay.
the chief and I met with Margaret Bruce, and we thought that her introduction for us to learn about the JPA and the creek and all of the parties and their interests was fascinating, and that's why we think it would be a good thing for us as a board to learn more about. Because there are 3 cities involved in the JPA, 2 of them are in the fire district, East Palo Alto and Menlo Park, and then you have Palo Alto on the other side. And so there's just a lot of moving parts that I think would warrant our attention.
Valley Water.
Yeah, but in terms of the cities and our section in the fire district, it's really Menlo Park and East Palo Alto, but Valley Water's in there, Stanford is in there, yeah, so, I mean, there are different stakeholders, but in particular, I just wanted to highlight that the two cities in our district. And she understands that, the fire district, like from, like Portola Valley, Alpine Road, that whole area, you know, the whole creek is an area that we're always watching and protecting.
All right, moving on to reports, requests of directors. Any reports or requests?
I have,
Yeah, Chuck, go for it.
I have two requests of our, I think fire chief is the proper person to address this. We're at the time, maybe even a little bit late, where we're already getting fireworks demonstrations at night, sometimes very late at night. You hear these like bunker buster bombs going off at 3 in the morning and so forth. And it wakes up people that are vulnerable populations for us, and they can't get back to sleep, and all the dogs go crazy and stuff. And I know, you know, East Palo Alto was just so nice about it. I think they only arrested 3 people last year, and they were patting themselves on the back.
Yeah.
But I think this is a real health hazard, and there's a fire risk, all sorts of things. So I would like you to please find out when you go to some of these meetings, what's going on? What's the police chief gonna do about it? Is there anything we can do to make that better somehow? The other thing, and I haven't heard anything mentioned about it, but it seems to me that the high-speed rail now is in serious trouble in terms of federal funding. And basically Trump has said he's not gonna fund it. I mean, that doesn't mean it won't happen, but I'd like to know, we've been assuming that there would be high-speed rail. We've assumed that there would be grade separation. I think we may be at the point now where there may not be any grade separation, and I don't know how that would affect kind of our organization or the regions we have within our district, in terms of if there's not a Berlin Wall across the railroad tracks, then maybe that changes how we organize ourselves and so forth. So those were the two requests.
What was the last request?
The last request is that he find out what planning is going on, if any at all, at either the county level or regional level or state level, for not having high-speed rail.
Any other board members? Virginia?
I'm gonna piggyback on Chuck's thing with regard to the fireworks, because I've been hearing them a lot, like pretty bad in our neighborhood, and it's not even the noise as much as this, I just think about like the Valparaiso Hill, you know, having exposure, and I think a lot of this is coming around, all of this is happening around like the school, and so I just worry about the open space area having firework exposure. It could be the Duck Pond, Sharon Heights, you know,
Just-
so.
Yeah, for the board's awareness, and I will check in with Chief Lou to see what actions are taking,
And
if any. Also know that we will be staffing up an extra resource on 4th of July than we normally do, just to help us deal with whatever incidents occur, so.
But can you ask about Menlo Park too? 'Cause it's not just,
Chief
it's not
Lewis
just, it's not just on, you know, it's not just on one side of Menlo Park. I think it's all over the city right now. And there are no boundaries really, even within San Mateo County, like the unincorporated area, but you know, the point is that it's out there, and I worry about a lot of the rural areas, especially along Alpine Road, near Stanford, you know, all of that.
Okay. Any other requests?
Thanks.
Okay. Last item on the agenda, president report. I just have one item that I wanna make a plea for board members. The chief and I are still trying to plan that, and I'm changing it from a retreat to a study session. So, and I'm labeling it as a study session retreat, so that we can if folks get behind that idea. And right now I've talked to a couple of people and we have some, I think, Chief, we got some good ideas that possibilities for a retreat. And I would want to make a plea to board members to think about topic areas that may seem to need further understanding, that currently may impact the district, or something that you as a board member might need some further clarification on, so that we can spend some time. And the ideal thing would to ask the question, if there is an idea, to begin to ask the question that we need an answer at the retreat regarding that particular issue, so as that we can stay focused on trying to resolve the question of the concerns that you may have. So, and please, what I would like to do is that if you have that idea, if you can you can send an email to me, but I think the chief would probably, since he's a much younger man than I am, can retain that information a lot easier than I. So, Chuck?
I just would like to request that we do it not on a work day.
We will do a poll and to see what we come up with, but I will note that in the as an option. Okay. Anything else?
So if you're open to one other piece of input on it besides the workday comment, you may think about if it's 2 or 3 topics of about 2 hours in duration each, breaking it up into multiple study session type format versus trying to find a day where
You do it all.
it requires 6 or 8 hours to
And like
accomplish.
piggyback off of a meeting.
Perhaps piggyback off a meeting or start at 5 o'clock, do it 2 hours before the regular board meeting, something like that.
Yeah.
So just as a suggestion.
Sure. So
You were saying that these things maybe aren't appropriate for a regular meeting, but I don't see why they aren't appropriate. I mean, to have an evening meeting as part of another meeting, or even a separate evening meeting, and just do it for 2 or 3 hours. We don't have to wear ourselves out with an 8-hour day. One other.
I think the point, Chuck, that was being made, just to comment on it, is that some of these topics, and the one you raised, which was the EMS, I just think it's very difficult in a typical board meeting format to spend adequate time talking through a big issue like that. And so having a study session type format where you have 2 hours for a topic is just a better approach. And I think there's probably, and I think Director Jones is interested in finding 2 or 3 topics that are these 2 to 3 hour discussions, and where we can really kind of get into the meat of some of the discussion that just doesn't typically fit in a normal kind of structured agenda board meeting.
That's fine.
So that's the concept.
I support that as
Yeah.
well. And I just say that, I think just as Gary was using the word study session,
Mhm.
I think maybe it would be a good idea to drop the word retreat, because
That's
retreat
what, yeah.
has a certain connotation that it's gonna be kumbaya and how do we get along together and things like that.
well, yeah, I know
It's
people
going down that.
He's heard that from other people.
Oh,
I heard that from other people. I mean, I take it different. I don't take offense to it, but I've been
Different definition.
different understanding of what retreats are all my life. And so, and even when I was back in college, we used to do the kumbaya moments and somewhere else. But, we also have been in government retreats where it's about all business for that particular. So, yeah, if retreat in any form or fashion, whether it's flashed or covered up, we can take that out and just have study session. That's gonna motivate folks to come to this meeting to talk about things. I have no problem with that, so. We can drop the receipt.
We can still have snack.
We can still have
We
that.
will definitely have snacks.
And we have a park bench out just in case
But I
you
won't
go
bring
out
my
and sit down.
ukulele. I won't bring my
Right.
ukulele, Chuck.
You can do that, but we can have all that. So thank you. And so think about it. Get your questions in the area of concern you want to spend some time with, to myself or the chief, preferably both of us, so we can think about it. And add that to our list, because like I say, there's 5 items on the agenda right now. So hopefully we need to probably set a deadline, chief, maybe to kind of have this, so we can kind of put it together. Say by this time next month, you guys can kind of submit your list, ideas. All right.
Okay.
So if all hearts and minds are clear, I think we're done for the night.
8:58, Michelle.
That
9:01.
clock said
9:01.
9:01, I'm looking
Nine-
at that clock.
Yeah, that one's wrong.
Okay, 9:01.
Okay, so, yeah, I adjourned the meeting at that particular time, so let me just tap it one time and